Alright. Welcome to Sideboard MTG. My name's Eric, and this is another episode of the State of Standard, my weekly meta coverage vlog, if you will. As always, if you like the show, then subscribe to the channel, and if you like the content in general, go ahead and give it a thumbs up so other people can see it, and let's get started here. First off, this week I want to talk about a few cards, and there's some cards we're going to want to mention multiple times as we go down through the top 16 of SCG Philadelphia. Now, there was a team constructed event, and I'm not going to be covering the team constructed event, and there was a couple cool decks in that, and I just don't really know if we can give those decks enough credit or not, because the team constructed does allow you to play, you know, a little bit more relaxed builds. Here we're going to see, you know, everyone really going hard for it, and we're going to see a ton of Hazret and his buddy, the Scarab God. Or actually, I guess you could say his nemesis. Most of the decks this week are either playing some version of the two. One of the two, and I don't think we have a deck yet that's actually playing both, but wow, wouldn't that just be crazy? Anyway, it has brought a real change to the meta that we have started seeing. Beforehand, if you were playing black, you were running 4 copies of Fatal Push and at least 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt. This week we're going to see about 3 and 4 copies in most of these decks, and most decks are going to have at least 3 copies of Vraska's Contempt, and that may not come at a surprise to you, but we're going to notice a couple other subtle deck building things that we can talk about, and that's going to be taxing your opponent's copies of Vraska's Contempt. And if you're playing the Grixis Mirror, then you're 100% going to want to tax those, and you may want cards like Rekindling Phoenix, and that may be something that we see going forward. You know, Grixis may start running some of these if the Mirror becomes something that, you know, is highly likely. And if you looked at the team constructed, there was a ton of Grixis decks, and we do have quite a few here to go through. It was one of 3 decks that actually had a repeat in the top of the standard event on Sunday, and Rekindling Phoenix I think is going to be really necessary for taxing those copies of Vraska's Contempt. Thrashing Brontodon, the good old Throntodon, unfortunately there are 0 copies in the top 16, so honorable mention to my beloved Throntodon. I do like this card, but it did not make an appearance, so unfortunately, let's move on. Let's just get on. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. My Throntodon didn't make it. Anyway, let's move into Mono Red. 2 weeks in a row, guys. Mono Red. It had first and second place last week. This week, just first place. And one of the first place deck from last week ran 4 copies of Invigorating Rampage. Now, if you look at that deck versus this deck, you're not going to see a lot of differences, except for 2 of those Invigorating Rampages have been kicked over to the sideboard. They're still here, but they're in the sideboard to make room for a couple of Abrades. Now, he does have a couple mainboard Harsh Mentors, but this is kind of, you know, the other utility slot, and you can move in and out as you feel the need. Now, topping his curve off, he did run 1 copy of Glorybringer. Everything else is pretty much standard red deck. And, I mean, you can say there's still some deserts in there. We've got the, you know, Scavenger Grounds and the Sun-Scorched Deserts, but for the most part, not the Ramunap Red we've had in the past. So this is more red deck wins. And that's what I'm going to, you know, Mono Red or red deck wins. Anyway, sideboard, very standard for Mono Red here, allowing it to have a couple more copies of Glorybringer or Chandra. Aethersphere Harvester for getting in the air is really good. That couple points of life gain, you know, might be really relevant in a mirror match or something. Invigorating Rampage. From what I can understand, it is possible for these decks to hit 6 mana for the Kari Zev, and that happens quite often. And a 6 mana Hazret, putting an Invigorating Rampage on it, swinging for 9, indestructible with trample, haste, is a really good way to finish out a game. And I do want to mention that is kind of the big deal there. Just out of nowhere, invigorating rampage, and you're dead. So be ready for that. Have your Vraska's Contempts at the ready. You might even be able to get a 2-for-1 off there, you know. All right, so our next deck here is Mardu Vehicles. Now, Mardu Vehicles, we've seen 3 copies of this last week, but this week the package that was in the third best Mardu Vehicles from last week is the best version of Mardu Vehicles this week. And what I'm talking about there is the Fatal Pushes. Now, none of the other Mardu Vehicles ran Fatal Push, but this one did, and it came in second place. Now, also, you won't see the Lightning Strikes. They've been ditched for a couple copies of a Braid, and everything else is going to be really standard Mardu Vehicles. Pia Nalar, great card. We're going to be seeing a lot of old Pia. Like she is still watching Chandra's back. Speaking of Mardu Vehicles, couple extra pieces of removal here. Cut to Ribbons is going to be showing up a lot today. There's a few decks that have decided to run a couple copies of this, and it makes sense. There are a few things that you want to be able to kill with this cut, and one of those being Glorybringer. This is a really good answer for that, and then gives you a nice little finish at the end. Walking Ballista, I mean, do we really need to talk about Walking Ballista? This card is just awesome. Also, if you have to dump it, you can play it for 0 with Hazoret. I've heard of that play. I don't like that play, but I hear it is possible. All right, Magma Spray here. The card's great. The mirror is becoming more and more relevant. These these hard of carrying, Aethersphere Harvester, Mardu decks, they are around. So Magma Spray, getting rid of the Scrap Heap Scroungers and such. Another copy of a Braid for all the above. Treasure Map, what a great way to draw a few additional cards and give yourself some artifacts so that you can trigger some of your other abilities. And Toolcraft Exemplar, active on too. Okay, Cast Out and Settle the Wreckage, Fumigate as the removal package. Chandra, letting her mom do the main board work. She's hiding out in the sideboard, but she'll be there if you need it. Glorybringer, same thing, Chandra's pet dragon at this point. And then, of course, we have a copy of Liliana Death's Majesty. Apparently, this is extremely good at bringing back Glorybringers, Hazarets. If they can somehow get you to discard a Hazoret, or if you discard your Hazoret and then, to a Hazoret, and they finally remove it, getting it back's not that bad. Anyway, most of the time you're going to be grabbing something else of value. Most of the time, probably a Pia Nalar. But being able to, pitch some other things, like maybe your copy of Cut to the graveyard, might just be exactly what you need to finish the game. A lot of options here in this Mardu Vehicles deck. It had kind of faded away with Teamer Energy being in the meta, but 100% back. Put up 3 copies last week. Also, one of 3 decks to put repeat copies in the top 16 this week. So Mardu Vehicles definitely back in the mainstream. So keep those Braids at the ready, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to need to be able to get rid of Heart of Kirin and Aethersphere Harvester and a number of other just, crazy things. All right, third deck. This one, 2 weeks in a row, we've had a blue-white deck fit in the third slot here. Now, last week was Jim Davis with his blue-white auras. This week we get a version of Saffron Olive's blue-white embalm, or a blue-white internalized deck. Now, the deck kind of hinges around Anointed Procession, but doesn't 100% need it to go off. However, unless you somehow remove all 4 copies, due to the fact that they have so much card draw and so many ways to look for it, they're pretty much going to have it. Once you get an Anointed Procession, heaven forbid getting multiples down, then you can embalm any of your creatures for just ridiculous value. Absolutely terrific. In the sideboard here, they do have a card that I was kind of on the fence about, and that's Silent Gravestone. Now, Silent Gravestone shuts down the Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk, and things of that nature that actually target, but does not shut down your ability to activate a card in the graveyard. So, embalming or eternalizing, no problems there. So, if there were ever a particular deck that would wanted this exact piece of graveyard hate, I think it's this deck. The rest of the deck's pretty much straightforward. You're going to play an Anointed Procession, bring things back from the graveyard for double the value, possibly triple the value, and it even has some answers with Gideon's Intervention to pretty much most of the format. I mean, you can even say Approach of the Second Sun, and then at that point they would have to wait until they found removal for the Gideon's Intervention before they could cast their Approach. Might just be enough time for you to get in with, you know, an Adorned Pouncer or two and just finish the game. Also, I've seen some crazy stuff where, you know, you just call Settle the Wreckage or something like that with your Gideon's Intervention and just swing straight through. You know, at that point they no longer have, you know, board wipes or anything, and you're golden. So something to be on the lookout for here. I like this deck. I think there's going to be a lot of people playing it, so make sure you definitely have ways to deal with this. I will say this deck does a very good job at taxing Vraska's Contempt, as almost everything in the deck needs to be answered in an exiled manner. So I really like the deck, and it has some really good interactions, ways to just absolutely come back from horrible board states because of the Anointed Procession. You can easily, you know, bring back a Angel of Sanctions, and if you have your Anointed Procession, you're going to take 2 of their permanents. You're going to get 2 of your 3/4s, and it's just going to be great. So anyway, that is the blue-white Eternalized deck. I like this deck. This deck's is great, but this is probably my most favoritist of all favoritist, greatest, like extra most bestesses. Man, this deck, Grixis. It's, first off, I love the utility lands, and you'll see in the land base here, he has shifted towards double red. The deck is double red, double black. Now, most of these Grixis-based decks hit double black, no problem. However, this one is definitely shifted for double red, and you'll see that here with the 2 of Fetid Pools and 3 of the Sloughs. Now, the Canyon Sloughs are just absolutely great. They come in early in the game, or they cycle late in the game, and if they are in early, they're going to bring back, or they're going to bring in your Dragon Skull Summits untapped, which is just terrific. It is an interaction to make sure you pay attention to. Also, you can play one on turn 1, play an Aether Hub on turn 2, and you're going to draw a card on turn 3 if you can drop down that Glint Sleeve Siphoner. It's kind of the miracle opening. You have all of your colors on turn 2, but you don't actually have to spend an energy to get down Glint Sleeve Siphoner. At that point, even if the Glint Sleeve gets removed, your Aether Hubs are just golden for the next few turns. I really love some of the starts that this deck can get, but this is an energy deck, and there's some differences here in this energy deck. Now, the first thing is the 4 Fatal Push are gone. They got rid of the Fatal Push, and instead we get Shielded Aether Thief and a couple copies of Dusk Legion Zealot. Now, at first I didn't know if I really cared for this or not, but just simply throwing down a Dusk Legion Zealot and guaranteeing yourself that card, and then making that become a chump blocker later is absolutely terrific. And then once you get deeper into the game and can bring back the Scarab God, it will then be able to bring back 4 copies of Dusk Legion Zealot that also draw a card when it enters the battlefield. Just all types of really good enter the battlefield triggers like Ravenous Chupacabra or Gonti itself. You can turn your additional 3 energy if they respond to your Whirler or Virtuoso in response to the energy trigger that so often happens. You can later turn that into a card from your Shielded Aether Thief. It's just how well the energy package works here in Grixis to go along with, you know, Harness Lightnings and things like that. Responding to a Glint Sleeve Siphoner trigger on the stack on your turn 3 when you only have 1 energy. You know, you can respond and, you know, give yourself, you know, 3 additional energy here with a Lightning Strike against a control deck. There's just so much variation, and it's kind of back to the point of, are we abusing energy too much or not? I don't think we are. I think Grixis is definitely that happy medium here, but it's definitely a 3-color deck. It's definitely extremely powerful. It has the tools needed to fight the meta and could possibly be one of the strongest decks in the format. I will say that if I were going to put someone on a deck right now and they were going to have to stick with that deck for the entire format, I would feel safest here, as the sideboard has, again, all the tools necessary. Now, you might want to be able to change 2 or 3 cards in and out of this deck, and that's basically going to be a Fatal Push and Hostage Taker. As those cards become a little bit better, you might want to be able to tweak those numbers a little bit, but as of right now, there are 0 copies of Fatal Push or Hostage Taker in this particular version of Grixis Energy. So that's Grixis Energy. I hope you guys like that deck. I think it's great, and I'm going to be trying to run this at some point this week for you guys. So if you do want to see this Grixis Energy list, just let me know in the comments, and we'll run it. Also, the 5th place deck is another Grixis deck, and 7th place was Grixis, and then farther on down the list. But anyway, the 5th place deck was another Grixis deck, and this one is Tezzeret, or Artifacts, or Improvise. And before I go ahead and let the cat out of the bag, if you will, this is not a Marionette Master deck. That's right. Let's look at the top end of the curve here. This is a Herald of Anguish deck. There are no Marionette Masters in this deck. Runs Maverick Thopterus, Herald of Anguish, can quickly get this down for... I've seen like turns where you can go Maverick Thopterus and then even Herald of Anguish on turn 4 or 5. It's just absolutely terrific. The amount of improvise you can get here with the early cards. Another really good card here on the top end. Remember, when you're putting down this many artifacts, Battle at the Bridge can gain you 5, 10 life, a million. Might as well be, right? Now let's look at some of those cheap artifacts. Prophetic Prism, being able to fix your mana, is really good because the mana base is not exactly what I would want out of a Grixis deck. More of the Grixis energy is what I would like, but this definitely helps you fix your mana. You can just pump any color mana into this, and it'll come out whatever color you want. So, I like the Prism for that. And then, Servo Schematic, giving you 2 artifacts. Sorcerer's Spyglass, giving you an artifact that gives a little extra there, giving you a ability to shut down the Scarab God of your opponent. And then, Treasure Map. Treasure Map can turn into quite a few artifacts for you. If you flip it, you can end up with 3 additional artifacts. Meanwhile, on turn 2, it's already an artifact. Now, this deck did run the Fatal Push because, let's face it, this is one of the better Revolt decks there are right now. So, anyway, Renegade Map is really good in that. Now, in the sideboard, pretty much just answers to red deck, the Scarab God, control, that sort of thing. A couple little pieces of innovation here would be, which would be Kumena's Awakening, which is a one-sided Howling Mine, and Golden Demise. I like Golden Demise, especially if you can get the City's Blessing, and I think this deck will be able to get the City's Blessing very easily with all of its permanents. So, all right, let's move on into number 6 here with the green-red monsters. This is where I wanted the Thrashing Brontodon to be, but alas, no Brontodon. Okay, so we did end up with 4 copies of Abrade. This deck's pretty much cookie cutter, exactly the way it was last week. Not a lot of really, major innovations here. I will say that, we're running 4 and 4 of the Rekindling Phoenix and Glory Bringers. The deck is really heavy on taxing Vraska's Contempt right there, so that maybe it needs a little bit more tax if we start seeing even more copies of Vraska's Contempt be played. And but for the most part, the deck's extremely aggro, gets in really quick, and if you want to be playing Jade Light Ranger, this is probably the deck to be playing it in. My personal opinion, I think 2 of these Abrades need to be Thrashing Brontodons, the good old Throntodon. I think he should be here. However, there is a good argument that on turn 6 you might want to be able to play 2 of your 3 mana spells, and Thrashing Brontodon and this would mean you have to have 4 green. Not impossible, but taxing. Anyway, that's the thought on it. I do think that it would fit at least as a 2 of in the main board here. Now, in the sideboard, I had to look this one up again. I had to pull this deck back up to see why this was in here, and I still can't figure it out. I have no clue why this card is in this deck, but it is on the deck list and is here. So let me know in the comments, why Direfleet Captain? Alright, so another copy of Death Gorge Scavenger, some Naturalize, again, could possibly be, Brontodon. And, a couple other cards, Carnage Tyrant and Struggle to Survive cards. Struggle has kind of teeter-tottered in and out of standard in certain decks for some time. It does do a lot of damage and is a pretty good answer to Glorybringer. So just saying, even if you're on the draw, as long as you hit your land drops, you can answer a Glorybringer with this. So instant speed on the front half. On the back side of it gives you a way to deal with that graveyard. Not bad. Alright, 3 copies of Chandra here, a couple copies of Sweltering Suns. We've seen some Dinosaurs deck run Sweltering Suns main board last week. Sweltering Suns is definitely a thing. However, this week, most people are saying that you need to get a little bit more than 3 damage. 5 damage, or you need an absolute wipe. So, 3 may not cut it with the green-black Constrictors list running around. So, which did not top 16 in this event. It littered the team constructed event, but it did not top 16 here. So number 7, a control deck. Well, I guess you guys already got to look at the sideboard here with River's Rebuke, some Glorybringers, Metallurgic Summonings, Gonti, Moment of Craving. Really good. Let's see what that all supports. Now, we've got 4 copies of Fatal Push, a couple Harness Lightning, Abrades, 3 Search for Azcanta. This deck means it. Now, Consigned to Oblivion, I did not pull up the Oblivion. Oblivion is just 4 mana, make them discard 2 cards at sorcery speed. And then Consign is 2 mana, bounce something, returns a target permanent to its owner's hand. Now, this is really good at getting rid of enchantments, and it's probably one of Grixis' biggest weaknesses is an enchantment. So being able to remove an enchantment at the end of their turn, and then getting the Scarab God back, you might be able to get just enough value out of it, or you can run the Oblivion half of it to make them discard that enchantment, and that might be all you need. Okay, so Supreme Will as the premium counter in this deck, not a lot of other counter. Now, the deck just runs the Glimmer of Genius, Vraska's Contempt, 2 the Scarab God, and 3 Torrential Gearhulk. So potentially we're looking at 6 Vraska's Contempt here, and no problems at getting to them. When it starts trying to finish out the game, it's going to happen really, really quick with the Scarab God or a Nicol Bolas, and then once you're close, you're going to get finished off with one of the multiple copies of Cut to Ribbons. Now, a lot of actual kill stuff here, so even though the deck has a few counters here main board, it's basically just going to be destroying everything that you play or returning it to your hand. So that's just kind of how the Grixis control deck plays. Now, answers to everything in the sideboard, the colors are absolutely terrific right now. There's just great answers to everything. So I will say that if you are building a control sideboard, make sure you know your playstyle and how you attack a certain deck or a certain archetype so that you can help augment that style of play. And here, I mean, he's got some Moment of Cravings, and I personally, I don't know if Moment of Craving is the right answer or not, but it was right for him. So I like a lot of the cards here, including Gonti, and I just kind of wish there would have been a few more smaller creatures somewhere that we could have brought in to kind of turn the tide against control decks. But for the most part, it looks like everything went down just fine with the Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk just controlling out that way like a blue-black control. Speaking of blue-black, we get a blue-black mid-range deck. Now, this is kind of more what I was talking about with the early creatures here. We've got 4 Gifted Afterborns and 4 Glint Sleeve Siphoners. Now, this is a blue-black deck, but we've still got the energy package here. Goes really, really good with Glint Sleeve Siphoner. If you have a Glint Sleeve in your hand and an Aether Hub, almost every time you're going to have a black source so that you can start off with that 2 energy, on turn 3 to draw the additional card, really pressuring the opponent to actually have an answer for your Glint Sleeve Siphoner, and if they don't, then, well, you're drawing cards, and then from there you can get into your Champion of Wits and things like that. I really like this card. I really like the whole deck here. Treasure Map, kind of the new innovation here in mid-range. I like what's going on with Treasure Map. Now, this is a 3 The Scarab God deck, 4 Vraska's Contempt, 2 Torrential Gearhulk. So we're looking at a potential of a lot of Vraska's Contempt. Now, it's going to be really hard to tax Vraska's Contempt in this deck because they have so many copies and so much card draw to be able to filter and get to those copies. I like this deck. If I was going to be running a mid-range deck other than Grixis, this deck definitely has my name written all over it. I like it. I like where it's going, and I think it has really good answers to everything except for enchantments. Now, it definitely doesn't have really good answers for enchantments, so you have to be able to counter those or stop those, and you can do that with Negate. Again, we see Moment of Craving, Cartouche of Ambition, giving some lifelink in there, as if your gifted Aetherborn wasn't enough. Gonti, Lord of Luxury, just all of the death touch you could possibly need to fight dinosaurs. A singleton copy of Hostage Taker. So far, it's the first copy we've run into today. No one else was really running Hostage Taker, and it's no real surprise to see Hostage Taker in the sideboard in this particular case. So that is your top 8. Now, I am going to move on into the top 16 here and run 9 through 16, but I'm not going to spend quite as much time on those, as I want to keep this video as short as possible here. Alright, so next we've got Jund Midrange. Now, Jund Midrange, Glint Sleeve Siphoners, we've got the Energy Package, Servant of the Conduit, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Jade Light Ranger. Okay, so this is looking a lot like the Jund Monsters list that we drew up. Alright, I'm starting to like it, but yet a little bit of an energy package. I can kind of get behind that. Again, Gonti, Lord of Luxury, 2 copies of Vraska's Contempt. Now, Chandra, Glorybringer. This is a lot like the Grixis deck, but just instead using blue or green for card draw instead of blue. And I can kind of get behind that. I don't think this deck has enough flying. There's no Heart of Kirin. There's no Phoenix. So I don't know. I think I would like some of those cards in here somewhere, and maybe Gonti in the sideboard. Now, we will see 2 more copies of Vraska's Contempt for the full playset, and that's probably one of the things that really got this deck through there, is having those answers. Now, 2 copies of Vraska here, giving you really good answers at dealing with enchantments and things, and if you're playing Grixis Energy and you think that there's just too many enchantments, maybe this Jund Energy list might be where you want to go. Answers for pretty much everything here with Deathgorge Scavenger, Lost Legacy, Naturalize. You could probably throw in a Brontodon in here somewhere if you wanted to. I know I would want to. I'm just, personally, I like the Brontodon. Anyway, we've got Grixis Control coming in at 10th place as well. Now, I won't really go over the real differences here. Mainly, they lie in the control package here, with using some more control, more counter. This is your more counter heavy version of the deck, and it does have a different number of Harness Lightnings, a different number of Fatal Pushes, a different number of Vraska's Contempt, all of those things, and that's kind of how you make room for disallow and censor. Now, one of the big things is this is on the classic 2 Search for Escanta, whereas the other one was on 3, and kind of really I want Search for Escanta every game. Now, also you're going to see that 3 copies of the Scarab God. Again, this deck is heavier on, I'm just going to slam the Scarab God and go from there, whereas the other one was 2 copies and 3 copies of Gearhulk. So there's your major differences, and there's some other subtle differences that I'll just let you guys kind of find on your own. Now, the Duresses, Moment of Craving, Abrade, Negate, all standard at this point. Doomfall and Angrath are a couple cards that we're not used to seeing. Commit to Memory here, another card that can answer of Carnage Tyrant. If you can commit their Carnage Tyrant while it's still on the stack, remember you can put target spell or non-land permanent second from the top on its owner's library. So while Carnage Tyrant is on the stack, it does not have hexproof, and you can just put that 2 cards down and buy yourself a little bit more time. Angrath giving you ability to steal something like a Galta, swing in for 12, seems really, really good. or something small and then have it die. I can personally think that I'd love to take someone's glint sleeve siphoner and then swing. I'll get the energy, and then their glint sleeve siphoner dies. Seems really decent to me. Glorybringer, things like that. These are all cards that you could actually take with Engraft, or just play your own copies, and they're here to play. Alright, so that is Grixis Control for 10th place. Now, Grixis Energy in 11th place. Grixis Control, Grixis Energy, and Mardu were the 3 repeat offenders here this weekend. And we're about to get into a nice little variation that I was happy to see. So, this is a lot like the other version of Grixis Mid-Range or Grixis Energy that we looked at. A little, subtle differences here. And we have a little bit of the control plan, kind of the way the other control deck was different from, or the 2 control decks were different from each other. These Grixis Energy decks are different in the exact same ways. This one adding a little bit more counter to the main board, whereas the other one adding, a little bit more creatures and things. So that's kind of the differences between the 2 here. And then in the sideboard, a lot more of the same. Moment of Craving, Search for Azcanta, Negate, Duress, giving you that ability to go into a more controlling game. A card we haven't seen in a while here, Confiscation Coup, and this is kind of like the Scarab God copy 3, and then you have a Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh here, which is absolutely terrific. Only 2 copies of Abrade in the entire deck. That did kind of, I thought that was a little bit strange, but I think people are not as worried about GPG, as everyone is packing enough hate for Mardu that GPG is just taking the hate from it. Anyway, number 12, we've got black-red aggro, and hang on, we'll get into red-black aggro next. So, number 12 is black-red aggro, and let's take a look. We're mainly black here in the fact that our 1-drops, Dread Wanderer, Fatal Push, Night Market Lookout, and we got some spells here that require black. Bringing back Scrap Heap Scrounger. This card is blacker than it is red because mana symbol, haha. It definitely got that going on, but the same, for Bomat Courier in the other direction. So, black-red, or even kind of splitting the difference here. I like the deck. I think the deck is really, really good. It's a Hazoret deck. It is a vehicles deck, but yet, Aethersphere Harvester, we're not getting in like the Heart of Kirin decks are. However, this deck has a really strong fight to it with, Earthshaker Kenras and a little bit more land than your mono red. So I kind of like this deck. I like where it's going. I like seeing the Daredevils here in the sideboard. Vance's Blasting Cannon, another card that has really impressed me. Also, you'll see more Vraska's Contempt here. And then a couple copies of Cut to Ribbon, because you have to have your own answers for Glorybringer. Engraft making another appearance. 3 copies of Abrade because, again, those artifacts. And then, of course, Duress for control. Now, that is the black-red aggro deck. Now, I just briefly went over that because now I want to jump down to the 13th place deck, the deck that was red-black aggro. Now, again, we've got Scrap Heap Scroungers, Bomat Couriers, Earthshaker Kenras, but this one actually has a red burn package and 4 mainboard Abrade. One of its premium pieces is removal. Also, you'll see very few 1-drops compared to the other deck. Now, no Shadow, or no Shock, none of those cards. So, you do get your Mog Fanatic or Fanatical Firebrand here. So, you do have that, but for the most part, this is definitely like a red burn deck. Now, Kindling Phoenix and Hazoret, this many of these worries me a little bit, but the deck did top 16, so it does have that going for it. 24 lands in this deck, and another land in the sideboard, so technically 25 lands in this red-black deck. Now, in the sideboard, a ton of more red cards here with 3 copies of Chandra, 2 Glorybringers, Pianalar, Sweltering Suns, and then 3 Aethersphere Harvesters if it needs to get in the air there, and then Duress, of course, to deal with control decks. I expected these decks to, one or two of them to have lost legacies or two, but no, they were just staying aggro enough that there just was not a worried about approach. By the way, no approach in the top 16 this weekend. Now, next for 14 here, we have Blue-Black Control. Now, Blue-Black Control, killer deck. I think that it's great. It won U.S. Nationals. It's had a couple updates since then. Personally, I think the Glimmer of Genius, I like the Hieroglyphic Illumination, unless you have some way to utilize that energy. There's not a lot of ways to utilize that energy in this deck, so I would prefer to have the ability to cycle early, and it even helps out your search for Escantas, and we've seen that in the U.S. Nationals version of the deck. But that does not mean that Glimmer of Genius is not a great card and you can't make some use out of it. Plus, having a few energy might become in handy if you're bringing back some of their energy users. Now, the Scarab God, absolutely great with Torrential Gearhulk. We all know how that works. And it pretty much just helps him cast a bunch of 4-ofs. I will say, Ravenous Chupacabra, the new main board creature here, love it. I think that is really, really cool. And I can understand not wanting to tap out early. You'll also still see a Consign to Oblivion here, so that card is something that these decks are looking forward to. Now, here we see the reason for Glimmer over Hieroglyphic Illumination. So if you're with me on the Hieroglyphic Illumination, if you're trying to flip the search for Escanta, then please run that. If you do not have some energy payoff, don't run the Glimmer. I just think Hyro is better. However, Glint Sleeve Siphoner with the trigger on the stack, you can cast a Glimmer and draw a card. So I think this card is good with Glimmer, and if you do have the Glint Sleeve Siphoners in the 75, then at that point the Glimmer you're getting that full value out of it. I love it. All right, so it is an option there, and I like that. Vizier Many Faces, Tetsamok, and Bantu's Last Reckoning as the higher end cards here on the in the sideboard. I don't know exactly how to feel about a singleton copy of Tetsamok. If you get a Tetsamok, that is great. I prefer like maybe something like a Liliana or something right there. But being able to use Tetsamok when you have it in your hand, and then even if it dies or goes to the graveyard, you can bring it back with Glorybringer. I mean the Scarab God. So there is some interaction there. I don't know if I would put Tetsamok in that spot or not, but he's got it here, and he came in 14th place with it. So Tetsamok. All right, next we've got Mono Black Aggro, back to Heart of Kirin, back to Aether Sphere Harvester. However, this is just single, like straight up Mono Black Aggro, Walk the Plank, Gifted Aetherborn, a ton of 1-drops. This is what you're looking for when you're looking for Mono Black Aggro. This is what you're looking for. I mean, he's got 4 Bone Pickers in here, guys. Amit Eternal. So we've got 4 Amit Eternal, 4 Bone Picker, Night Market Aeronaut. What? Let me read this for you. This is a 4-mana 2/2 flyer. Night Market Aeronaut enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. So you can get a 4-mana 3/3 flyer. I don't know if that's where I would want to go with this, but I definitely understand getting in the air and how important that can be. Plus a 3/3 body could definitely be worth it. I just don't 100% know if I would want a 4-mana card in the deck like this. Bone Picker is in a whole nother class because you can, turn 2, throw Bone Picker. I think this would have been better served as like Walking Ballista or something, but I get it. I get it. It is this is one of those decks where you're turning things sideways even though you're about to like lose a creature in combat. So you're triggering Revolt. Okay, maybe. But maybe also just Vraska's Contempt. Now, in the sideboard, we do have a copy of Vraska's Contempt, a more Aether Sphere Harvester, Kite Self Rebooter, Moment of Craving. We're really starting to see a lot of this Moment of Craving. The other 2 Gifted Aetherborns, and then 4 Duress. Now, no Lost Legacy again, and I don't know, but if a good approach deck comes back up, we might. The meta might not be ready, not running good answers for approach. So we'll find out. All right, so next here we've got the last version of your Mardu vehicles, and the only real innovation here is he didn't get rid of his lightning strikes. Left the abrades in the sideboard, no lightning strikes, no cuts. Run the Amit Eternal. We see this as a one of in some of these decks. It kind of comes and goes, but he did keep the Fatal Push, so Fatal Push is not gone. This is definitely a good card. One mainboard Chandra, kind of we see that from time to time. Scavenger Grounds in the sideboard. I mean, how do you guys feel about like sideboard lands? You know, really? All right, Duress, Abrade. 3 copies here, a Magma Spray, Sweltering Suns, pretty much straightforward, exactly what we were seeing from some of the other decks. Glorybringer, Angrath, you know, just straight up, just a good, solid Mardu deck, and he come in 16th place with it. So, if you guys want to see this deck or any of the other decks, you can check in the description box below for a link to Star City Games events. And then, if you guys want to play any of these decks, I definitely say hit up Manatraders. There's a link in the description box below, and if you use that link and when you sign up for Manatraders and it asks you for a coupon code, put in sideboard MTG with no spaces, and it'll get you 10% off your first 3 months with Manatraders. That'll allow you to play absolutely every one of these decks whenever you get ready to, without even having to own the cards. Works great. I think it's awesome. I think you guys will really like it. And you know, hey, if you get online and you want to join our deck testing here, you can hit up our Reddit. If you're online, just send me a message if you want to join the MTGO clan. If you want to submit your decks for our Subscribers Sunday event, you can do that. Either way, I am Eric from Sideboard MTG. I had a lot of fun. Hope you guys have fun. We'll see you next time here on Sideboard MTG.